Maverick News presents The Rick Walker Show. Defrag your mind.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the Maverick News Channel. I'm Rick Walker. Hello, Maverick family, and hello, new viewers from all over the world. Great to have you guys here. Gonna have a pretty good lineup of stories, information to share with you tonight. Gas prices. Who wants to pay $2 a liter? Well, out in Vancouver and some other areas of Canada, they've already hit $2. For those viewers that we have in the United States wondering how much that really costs, well, the Canadian dollars are worth less than the US dollar, which means we pay more for things. Plus, there we have 3.78 liters in a gallon of gas. So take that $2, multiply it by 3.78. That gives you your price in gallons. U.S. gallons are different size than imperial gallons too, but generally speaking, that'll give you an idea of what we're talking about here tonight. All that before the carbon tax hits. That is an issue that is front and center in Parliament, along with the situation in the Middle East. There was a lengthy session in Parliament overnight, and it has left the Liberal House divided, with one member of Parliament in particular reflecting on what his future might be or might not be with the Trudeau Liberals moving forward. We also have coming up Kevin Meli. Kevin Meli will join us shortly here on the program to discuss the situation in the Middle East. He will comment on new reports. Well, yeah, they are new reports about Russian troop movements in Syria and how that affects what's going on near the Syria in the area around Syria, Israel, where the troops are going, what it all means. We'll get into it. What else do we have tonight? We'll go to the White House. We're going to go as well to Joe Biden, who's giving a live address on lowering prices, in particular housing prices for Americans, or so he says. So we'll get into all that as well. And a few other things, but those are sort of the main areas to touch on tonight. So stay with us. When we come back, we'll go to that address with Joe Biden, where he's going to talk to us about inflation and the affordability of homes. So don't go away. I'll be right back.
Feel the vibrations. Our quest continues. The truth is out there. We are Mavericks.
Lots of ground to cover tonight, but Joe Biden is out in Las Vegas talking about lowering the cost of living for Americans. He's kind of laying out his plan. I thought we should go and listen in on some of that with the president. Here we
We were
go.
able to
Just
buy a
talking
three-bedroom
right now
home
about
in new development because of
the
these
affordability
areas
of
are building
homes in particular.
40, 50 homes at a shot. We had 4 kids, 3 bedrooms, and a grandpop living with us. And we weren't poor, but we never had anything at the end of the month. And so what my dad used to always say was that the way you build equity in your home is the way you build wealth. So when you build enough equity in your home, then you have enough money to borrow to get something new and move and so on. And that's how everybody makes it. Everybody in the middle class makes it there usually through equity in their home. Well, look, it works. What we've been doing works to increase housing supply and keep costs down in the future. First, for homeowners, if inflation keeps coming down, and it's predicted to do that, mortgage rates are going to come down as well. But I'm not going to wait. I'm not going to wait. I want to provide an annual tax credit that will give Americans $400 a month for the next 2 years as mortgage rates come down, to put toward their mortgage when they buy their first home or trade up for a little more space if they come from a middle-class background. They come from a family that has well under $200,000 or less. We're also making it more affordable to refinance your home by eliminating title insurance fees on federally funded mortgage-backed mortgages. That's going to save folks as much as $1,500. The federal government can afford to do that. In addition, last week, the National Association of Realtors agreed for the first time that Americans can negotiate lower commissions when they buy or sell their home. On a typical home purchase, that alone could save folks an average of $10,000 on the sale or purchase. I'm calling on realtors to follow through on lowering their commissions to protect home buyers. And folks, we're also working to end the legacy of discrimination on the basis of home valuations. It's exacerbated, as you know, it's exacerbated a racial wealth gap and held back black and brown families. And it's simply wrong. You know, if a developer came along and built 20 homes on one side of a highway and 20 homes on the other, and the one side had people with black and brown backgrounds, and the same exact home was built in a white neighborhood, guess what? The day you bought that home, that black home was worth 20% less than the white home, or the Hispanic home is worth 20% less. It's wrong. Second, my plan goes to work so we can bring rents down. My administration is cracking down on big corporations who break antitrust laws by price fixing to keep the rents up. That's how they work it out. Landlords should be competing to give folks the best deal, not conspiring to charge them more. We're also going after what I call unfair rental and junk fees. You know, like the ones you charge when you move into an apartment. One of those surprise convenience fees that aren't convenient at all. You can add up to hundreds of dollars. And so some of you have been stuck with that. Folks are tired of being played for suckers, and I'm tired of letting them be played for suckers. We're also expanding rental assistance to over 100,000 more low-income families since I took office, the biggest increase in 20 years. My new plan would help hundreds of thousands more, including foster kids, as you mentioned earlier, aging out of foster care, so they have to move out, living on their own for the first time. It's also going to help thousands of veterans afford the rent, because no one should be homeless in America, especially someone who served this country. And folks, you know affordable housing has been a challenge for a long time. To solve it long term, we have to increase supply, because when supply is down, demand is up, costs rise. The bottom line to lower housing costs for good is to build, build, build. And that's why, to help your congressional delegation, I've cut red tape so more builders can get federal financing for the new projects. A record 1.7 million new housing units are under construction nationwide right now because of it. In fact, today my administration reported that single-family housing starts are the highest level they've been in nearly 2 years, and my new plan would create 2 million affordable homes, including tens of thousands right here in Nevada. You know, and we're doing this through what they call the neighborhood home tax credit to build or renovate affordable housing. And, you know, and we do it by expanding the bipartisan low-income, it's called the low-income, sorry with all these titles, but that's what these bills are, a low-income housing tax credit to build affordable rental units, which are supported by lenders, builders, families, and housing advocates alike. Look, my plan will also establish an innovative program to help communities build and renovate housing or convert housing from empty office spaces into housing, empty hotels into housing. My plan would provide $8 billion to fight homelessness and move people into homes and off the street. And I'll say it again. In the United States, no one should have to live in the street. No one. Folks, altogether, experts are calling these measures, quote, the most consequential housing plan in more than 50 years. But let me be clear. It's not only my plan, it's fully paid for. And while I'm paying for it, we're also reducing the federal debt at the same time. You know, the Republicans talk about, you know, big tax and Democrats. Give me a break. Come on. I've already cut the federal deficit by $1 trillion since I took office. The last guy increased the deficit by a larger margin than any president in American history in the 4 years he was president. I signed the bipartisan budget deal to cut another $1 trillion in the next decade. For example, because of the law I signed, finally, Big Pharma, the pharmaceutical companies, and we finally beat them, giving Medicare the power to negotiate the prescription drug prices they pay for seniors like they do at the Veterans Administration. The VA says, I need this for veterans, but I'm not going to pay you more than this for this amount of money. Well, it doesn't just save seniors money, it's already saving taxpayers money. The one thing we've been able to do is when I did that one thing of making sure that you're going to be able to have insulin for $35 instead of $400 a month. Well, guess what? That cut the deficit by $160 billion. $160 billion. And there's a reason for it. Not only saves seniors a lot of money, when I first wrote it, it included everybody. The Republicans knocked out everybody and left the seniors in. They couldn't lose that one. But here's the deal. $160 billion over the next decade because Big Pharma doesn't have to pay out the $400 a month. They're paying out $35 a month to Big Pharma. My plan would double the number of drugs able to be negotiated to save another $200 billion a year. This bill has already been passed. Here's the deal, folks. You know, right now, we cut the deficit by even more by making the very wealthy begin to pay their fair share. But here's the deal. If you're going to deal with Medicare and you want to make sure you're going to be able to save money, well, guess what? Many of you know seniors who have cancer drugs that cost up to $35,000, $15,000 a year, $12,000, $15,000 with all their other costs. Well, guess what? Already passed a law beginning in 2024, January 2025. No matter what the total cost of prescription drug costs for a senior are, they will not have to pay more than $2,000, period. $2,000. It's going to save another $200,000. Anyway, I get really. We drove out.
I forget what I'm going to say, and then
you had a prescription needed filled.
then I stop and pretend that I just am emotional.
I'd say, okay, let's
because
let's
I
fly
can't
to
keep my
Toronto,
mind straight, and I
or to
can't
Berlin,
remember what I
or
was
to
talking about.
London or to Rome or any major city in America. I'll get you that same prescription filled in those cities for 40 to 60% less than it cost you at a pharmacy here. It's wrong. But look, I'm a capitalist. If you want to make $1 billion, great. Just begin to pay your fair share of taxes. In 2020, 55 of the largest Fortune 500 companies made $40 billion in profits. They paid zero in federal taxes. Not anymore. Thanks to the law I wrote and we signed, big companies now have to pay a minimum of 15%, but that's still too little to have to pay in federal. Wouldn't you all trade that? You'd pay 15% instead of what you're paying now. But look, it's time to raise the corporate minimum tax to at least 21%. So every big corporation finally begins to pay their fair share. You know, before the whole thing, COVID, there were 750 billionaires with a B in America. Today there are 1,000. You know what they pay in average, what the average tax for billionaires in America? 8.2% federal tax. Anybody want to trade them with a billionaire tax? I'd take 8.2%. It's far less than the vast majority of Americans pay. No billionaire should pay a lower tax than a teacher, a sanitation worker, a nurse, anybody busting their neck. That's why I'm proposing, if I'm reelected, we're going to get it done. A minimum tax of 25% for billionaires. That's not even the highest tax rate, just 25%. You know how much that would raise over 10 years? $500 billion in 10 years. $500 billion if they just started to pay that. Imagine what we could do. We could cut the federal deficit even more. We could invest in things that make America great again. Child care, a whole range of things.
Make America great again.
And we'd all be better. Affordable child, home care, housing, all of which help families grow our economy. By the way, every one of these things I proposed, I asked the Treasury Department to do a study for me because I'm a pro-union guy, and everybody, I've been the most pro-union.
He's a capitalist and pro-union.
And here's the deal.
And a socialist. Wants to tax the rich. He wants to eat the rich because he's a capitalist, a free market guy. He's everything to everybody. He's even a Republican to Republicans as a Democrat, and he's a Republican MAGA guy to everybody because he wants to make America great again. Just like somebody I've heard say, I'm sure I've heard that someplace before. He wants to make America great again? Where did that come from? I think maybe he's got Donald Trump on the brain. Empty hotels, going to turn those into homes. I've heard plans like that before. $8 billion for that. He says that his plan is fully paid for. How can something be fully paid for when everything I guess it can be paid for with borrowed money. They're running a massive debt every year. But it's fully paid for, yeah, with debt. Double speak. Bafflegab. That's his housing plan. And he's talking a bit about pharma and prescription drugs there as well, talking about trying to make life more affordable for Americans. Are you buying it? I'm having a hard time buying into that. That sounded like he was saying things that he knew people wanted to hear to me. Yeah. Don't go away. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to dig into this issue of Gaza, Palestine, Israel, a two-state solution. It came up in Parliament. It has left Justin Trudeau's Liberals kind of divided. One key member of Parliament in particular wondering if he even wants to be part of the government anymore.
Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay, we're back. Quebec Liberal MP Anthony Housefather is reflecting on his future in the Liberal Party tonight. This after there was an NDP motion in Parliament on Palestinian statehood. It did pass in the House of Commons, but it was heavily amended at the end. Housefather was one of three Liberals who voted against the final motion. which in the end, in its amended form, amended apparently, it looks like, between the Justin Trudeau Liberals and Jagmeet Singh's New Democratic Party members. It in the end ended up calling, instead of for a non-binding two-state solution in the Middle East between Israel and Palestine, it now only calls for progress towards just a two-state solution instead of recognition of an actual Palestinian state. Watered down. There was applause from the Liberals for the NDP. The other two members of Parliament who voted against were former Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino and Manitoba Member of Parliament Ben Carr. Both of those MPs say they're disappointed in how this last-minute 11th hour amendment process went. I guess it was injected right at the end. There wasn't really even much, if any, time given to debate the amendment. In the end, it passed in the form that I just described. Now, Anthony Housefather is Jewish. He gave this passionate speech during the proceedings and the vote.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the the President of the Treasury Board.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am a Canadian, I am a Jew, and I am a Zionist. I am proud to have been born in this country. I am proud that my family came here in the 19th century and helped build this country. My family members fought in the World War I and World War II. We are part of Canada and lucky to be so. I've represented Canada in swimming internationally. I've represented Canada as a parliamentarian. And there's no place in the world I want to be other than in Canada. The Jewish community, of which I am part, is a religious community that has existed for thousands of years, but we're also a people. And we, since we've been here in 1760, have helped build this country. We got enormous opportunities, more than we've received anywhere else in history. But we've also, in academia, in law, in medicine, in physics, in science, in sports, in journalism, we have helped build this country. And 95% of Canadian Jews are Zionists. Zionism means we believe that we have a right to have one Jewish state in our ancestral homeland. Jews are indigenous to Israel. And we have had a history where Jews have faced persecution in every country in the world. We were expelled from England in 1290. We were expelled from Spain and Portugal in the 1490s. We faced the Crusades where people were killed. We were put in ghettos throughout Europe. We faced the Holocaust. Jews were expelled from Arab lands in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. And we needed one place where every Jew in the world knew if things went wrong in their country that they could go. And that is Israel, and that's what Zionism means. So when I get horrible, horrible threats and emails saying I'm a dirty Zionist instead of a dirty Jew, that's what Zionism means. So at all these demonstrations around the country, outside of synagogues, and outside of Jewish schools, and outside of Jewish community centers, where people are screaming about how horrible Zionists are, well, I am a Zionist, and I'm not embarrassed or ashamed of being a Zionist. And Canadian Jews should not have to live through what we're living through right now. My community is terrified. We are being intimidated over and over by people protesting outside of Jewish buildings. Canadian Jews have no control over what happens in the state of Israel. Yet for some reason, Jewish buildings across this country are being targeted. In my own riding, at the Jewish community offices where the Jewish Public Library and the Holocaust Museum are located, demonstrators went on private property, surrounded the building, blocked access to the building, and blocked anyone from leaving for over 3 hours. This is happening all over the place. And the demonstrators, while they are perfectly allowed and right to demonstrate wherever they want, they cannot go on private property and they can't block other people from exercising their right to free speech. If I can't enter a building because I can't hear a speaker and they block me and they yell at me and they scream at me and stop me from going in, well then their rights are infringing on my rights. And police need to step in and act as police, and all leaders across this country need to tell them to do so, because this is not fair anymore. It is too much. And Jewish Canadians just don't deserve this. On campuses across this country, Jewish students have told me horrible stories from British Columbia to Newfoundland about being intimidated on campus, about walking into dormitories and having anti-Israel slogans through the walls. They walk into a building and they're asked, are you a Zionist or not? And if they're a Zionist, supposedly they're not allowed into their dorm. This is not Canada. This is not the country that I know and love, and nobody should be forced to feel this way, which is then how I get to this motion. Because the Jewish community right now is demoralized and intimidated. This motion creates one winner and one loser. Most Canadian Muslims will vastly support this motion, and they're feeling lots of pain right now in watching the events that are happening in Gaza. But Canadian Jews, if this motion is adopted, will feel tremendous pain, because the way this motion is constructed, it is clearly creating a false equivalency of the State of Israel and the terrorist organization Hamas. And in the event that we want this war to end, Hamas can easily lay down arms and surrender and return the hostages and stop using citizens of Gaza as human shields. And essentially, while I appreciate my colleagues in the NDP, this motion, as some other colleagues have said, rewards Hamas. We, for generations in Canada, under successive Liberal and Conservative governments, have said that the way to recognize a Palestinian state, which we all want, living in peace side by side with Israel and in dignity and offering dignity to both peoples, should come when the two states, the two parties, negotiate their borders and the Palestinians elect a government to govern that territory. The West Bank is governed by Fatah, which has been in power without an election for 20 years. Mr. Abbas was elected in 2004. And on the other side, on Gaza, you have a terrorist organization, Hamas, that has not held elections since 2007 and is recognized by Canada as being a terrorist organization. So Hamas launched the deadliest attack on Israel, the deadliest pogrom against Jews since the Holocaust, and we're changing our foreign policy to reward Hamas and say, good for you, terrorists. You attacked a sovereign state, killed lots of people, including babies and women and everyone else, and raped and pillaged and brought people back as hostages who have now been there for almost 5 months. And yeah, let's recognize that state that we've never recognized before. What a great idea for other places in the world where terrorism ferments. Who would love this? Iran. Iran would love this, because Iran is the people in the Middle East that are fermenting terrorism everywhere, whether it's Hezbollah in the north or Hamas in the south. They are supporting this, and they are loving every minute as the world tears itself apart to criticize Israel instead of focusing on Iran and its regime. And when you talk about arms sales, Mr. Speaker, let's first recognize that the American government supplies billions of dollars of arms to Israel. Canada and the Canadian government don't sell arms to Israel directly. We have provided for many years only non-lethal weapons because nobody's applied for lethal weapon permits. And these non-lethal weapons are going to a friend and ally, Israel, at a time of war. Imagine what the world would look like if all of the countries in the world, which I presume is the principle of the motion, say, we will not ship arms or even non-lethal weapons to Israel, while Hamas and Hezbollah will continue to get their weapons from Iran, through Egypt, and through Lebanon. So Israel, while it has missiles launched at it from Hezbollah in the north and Hamas in the south, will be unable to fight back and be bereft of weapons. That, Mr. Speaker, is a false equivalency that we're now making between Hamas, a terrorist organization, and Israel. And I don't think that this motion goes toward furthering anything toward peace. In fact, it's doing the opposite. It's telling our friend and ally that they're being treated in a different way than the terrorist organization, which is benefiting from weapons being shipped to it. I had the opportunity with the member from Calgary Nose Hill and the member for Eglinton Lawrence and the member for Thornhill and the member for Winnipeg. I wish I could remember the name of the ride in Charleswood, St. James, Assiniboia, Headingley, to visit Israel. And we saw the wreck of the destruction of Hamas. We visited a kibbutz where we saw buildings burned and people who had been burned to death in their safe rooms. We saw blood splattered all over the place, houses ransacked. We heard from people who had been terrorized. And you have to understand, Mr. Speaker, Israel feels that if they don't destroy the terrorist group Hamas, there will be another pogrom that kills more Israelis tomorrow or the next week or the next month. So I understand how horrible it is to see the situation in Gaza. I understand how the world looks at it with revulsion to see people dying. But we also have to understand that a democratic nation has been on many occasions attacked, war started against it, and now all sides in Israel feel they need to fight back. And so, Mr. Speaker, I stand with Israel, our democratic ally, our friend, and we, when a time of war, is when you look at countries and you say, do you stand with our ally or not? Mr. Speaker, Canada should be standing with Israel. Canada should be defending the right of Israel to fight back against a terrorist organization, and we should not be passing motions that make the terrorist organization equivalent to a democratic state. Thank you.
So the motion ended up passing in its amended form, as I indicated. So that was overnight. Then today, just a short time ago, on Parliament Hill, House Father, approached by journalists and asked about his views on this today, after the fact, after the motion passed. And what did we get? We got more emotion and reflection from Anthony Housefather, who is reflecting on what his future with the Liberal Party might be, the Justin Trudeau Liberals. He's thinking of, obviously, stepping aside or maybe leaving the party. It isn't really clear, but you can see that he's doing a lot of soul searching tonight.
I right
asked
now,
if he's going to stay on as parliamentary
secretary.
secretary.
It was a very hard time for me, last night's vote, what happened. I will be very honest. I felt that the message that I put through about how disturbing the original motion was, clearly didn't prevail. And whenever you don't prevail, although political battles, you have battles that you win and battles that you lose. That was a difficult one to lose.
You seemed really upset about the last-minute amendment that your government put forward. How'd that make you feel as a parliamentarian?
I think when you bring forward an amendment 5 minutes before the end of debate and nobody has a chance to debate it, so nobody has actually seen it or reviewed it, it's bad parliamentary form. I think parliamentarians have a right to know and understand what they're voting on, in all cases, whatever party does it. And I've tried to maintain a balanced view throughout, and I felt that wasn't correct as a parliamentarian.
Do you feel like you can stay in the Liberal caucus?
Look, again, right now I'm reflecting on what happened yesterday, and when I have an announcement on how I've ended my reflection, which could be whenever, I'll certainly let you know.
But what did happen yesterday? What is your assessment of what happened ultimately at the end of the day for this change to be enacted the way it was? Why did it happen?
Why did it happen? Obviously, the government and the NDP negotiated an amendment. Now, was the amendment a better amendment than the original motion? Of course. But was it necessary to do that when I still don't agree with the contents even of the final motion? I don't think so. I think we could have just voted down an NDP opposition day motion easily. And that should have been, to me, the course that we took.
Do you think there's an effort being made to keep you in the Liberal Party right now?
I think a lot of my colleagues are trying to show me a lot of love right now, but again, I imagine people want to keep me. I think they'd want to keep anybody, wouldn't they?
Is this the first time you're actually kind of reflecting on your role within this party? I mean, this has been going on for a number of months now. There's been tensions in Canada, rising anti-Semitism. You've seen your government struggle to sometimes or come up with a position that satisfies everybody, and you've kind of been at the forefront of this. But is this the first time you're actually kind of reflecting on the future here?
I think it's the first time in my parliamentary career that I've had a reflection like this, where I truly felt last night that a line had been crossed. When my party members got up and cheered and gave a standing ovation to Heather McPherson and the NDP, I started reflecting as to whether or not I belonged. And I will let you know further how I feel over the coming days. For the moment, I'm still there. All right?
Whether or not you belong, though, like that's a very profound thing, and I wonder if you could just expand on that.
I felt that Marco Mendicino, Ben Carr, and I were somewhat isolated, right? I think that it's very hard on an issue of identity like this, where as a Jewish Canadian, I am such a proud Canadian, as I tried to explain yesterday in my speech, but I also care passionately about the state of Israel, because it's the only refuge for Jewish people when they're exiled or thrown out of countries. And today, with the strong wave of anti-Semitism across the world, you need an Israel. And I didn't feel like some members of parliament, or a lot of members of parliament, understood the existential threat that Israel faces.
In Syria, when there's
and the fears of Jewish Canadians as a result of what's happening domestically and what's happening abroad. And it easily could have been that we voted against as a party in the NDP motion, and we did not do that. And then we gave a standing ovation to the NDP member who sponsored the original motion. And I have to reflect now.
I don't think we've had an issue so divisive as this, maybe ever, in my lifetime. And now, Jared Kushner, Donald Trump's son-in-law, says Israel should bulldoze an area of the Negev desert and move Palestinians there. He has praised the, in his words, very vulnerable potential of Gaza's waterfront property and suggested Israel should remove civilians while it, in his words, cleans up the strip. He was being interviewed at Harvard on the 8th of March. The interview being made public. I have a portion of that here for you, a clip. Bring it up for you. Let's hear what he has to say. I am concerned that maybe some of this is being taken out of context in the media reports tonight, and this is coming in to me here unvetted, so I'm just going to let this roll, and we're hearing it together for the first time right now.
Refugees, Turkey took them, Europe took them, Jordan took them. For whatever reason, here in Gaza, there's refugees from the fighting, from an offensive attack that was staged from Gaza. Israel's going in to do, a long-term deterrence mission. And it's unfortunate that nobody's taking the refugees.
But also there are real fears on the part of Arabs, and I'm sure you talk to a lot of them, who think once Gazans leave Gaza, Netanyahu's never going to let them back in.
Maybe, but I'm not sure there's much left of Gaza at this point. So, if you think about even the construct, Gaza was not really a historical precedent, right? It was the result of a war. Right, you had tribes that were in different places, but then Gaza became a thing. Egypt, used to run it, and then, over time, you had different governments that came in different ways. So you have another war. Usually when wars happen, borders are changed historically over time. And so my sense is I would say, how do we deal with the terror threat that is there, so that it cannot be a threat to Israel or to Egypt? Right, I think that both sides are spending a fortune on military. I think neither side really wants to have, a terrorist organization enclaved right between them. And Gaza's waterfront property, it could be very valuable to, if people would focus on kind of building up, livelihoods. You think about all the money that's gone into this tunnel network and into all the munitions. If that would have gone into education or innovation, what could have been done? And so I think that it's a little bit of an unfortunate situation there, but I think from Israel's perspective, I would do my best to move the people out and then clean it up. But I don't think that Israel has stated that they don't want the people to move back there afterwards.
You know, you saw Tom Friedman's column on Tuesday about where he put forward a plan to get out of this. Biden should recognize the Palestinian Authority unilaterally as a state, and MBS should go to Jerusalem like Egyptian President Anwar Sadat did in 1977, and he should say, I'll normalize with Israel, I'll recognize West Jerusalem as your capital, and I'll even pay to rebuild Gaza if you recognize a Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital. What do you think? Good idea?
No, I don't think that's a good idea. I think that there's certain elements of it that are correct. I think proactively recognizing a Palestinian state would essentially be rewarding an act of terror that was perpetrated into Israel. So it's a super bad idea in that regard.
It's a complicated issue because you have history, you have religion, you have political ideology, you have geopolitics coming into play. You have two superpowers, mainly Russia, the United States. China's involved in the background too, I think. But you have what I would say are sort of traditional patterns of great power rivalries reemerging globally. This, as Russia has reasserted its place geopolitically, recovering from the fall of the Soviet Union, rebuilding, becoming a great power again. China becoming a great economic rival to the United States, an equal even. Now it's no longer a unipolar geopolitical reality. That's playing out in part in the Middle East, in Gaza right now. This is because you're seeing, we've seen an opportunity lost, which Richard Nixon has even referred to in the past, back in the 90s, long after he was president, but talked about the United States, the West, having an opportunity to help make democracy, to make freedom work in Russia, but instead continued an adversarial relationship with Russia instead. There was a time when it looked like the Cold War had ended, but instead the United States did not, and the West, Europe, did not welcome Russia into the fold or encourage Russia to become part of the community. And some would say that Russia also had certain demands that the West was not willing to meet. And so today you have Russia and Vladimir Putin looking forward to a new kind of future, even a new world, where Russia is one of the leading nations forming new alliances and a new geopolitical reality with the BRICS nations, doing it in conjunction with alliances with India, Brazil, China, Iran. And those relationships between those nation states and others, many others, are coming to bear in the Middle East, because Russia is, of course, aligned with nations that the United States is at odds with. It's just the way things kind of fall into place. And in the Middle East, you have these different countries kind of squaring off. As a result, Russia is on the side, or is aligned with a lot of countries that are opposed to maybe even the existence, let's be frank, of Israel. While some people are calling for a two-state solution, we've seen many people since October 7th in particular say that a two-state solution is not really even an option. While some people continue to pay lip service to it, as we've seen in Parliament in Canada, even overnight, paying lip service to it because I think there is political expediency and advantage in doing that. I don't know that there's real sincerity in it. It's a lot of politics being played. Biden also, I think, playing politics. You've got a giant public relations battle going on, an information warfare battle raging. Joe Biden is in the center of that. In an election year, he can ill afford to make a mistake here. Usually, if a country is at war, it favors the sitting president. Maybe some would say that's why we're in a war. Some might think that there's some conspiracy that way. Who am I to say for sure one way or another? That's just a theory. But here we are with Joe Biden putting pressure on Netanyahu to back off in Gaza, not go into Rafah, and make sure that civilians are protected, or at least that again is the lip service that is being paid to this. And because I think largely because back home, Biden needs to bring those Muslim votes back over to his side, especially in places like Michigan, where, of course, they have, I think, the largest Muslim population in the United States, and he's trailing in the polls to Donald Trump. And yet, isn't it weird how all of this geopolitics plays out, how the political landscape becomes so complicated? Because if you listen to the Democrats, they'll say that Donald Trump and his supporters are a bunch of neo-Nazis. And in fact, you can easily point to some people on the right side of the political spectrum who are clearly not supportive of Israel or Zionism, if you want to call it that. And yet Trump just, I believe it was yesterday, came out very strongly in support of Israel. Much stronger, I think, even than Biden has been. In fact, he says that anyone that votes Democrat hates, I think his words were, hates Jewish people. That they're voting, Jewish people who vote for Biden are voting against their own interests. Let me just check that. So here it is. Trump draws ire for saying Jews who vote for Democrats hate their religion. Here it is here. Here, I'll show you the headlines on this. So he's coming up very strongly in favor of Israel. In fact, you'll see Jewish leaders saying that Donald Trump was the greatest friend Israel ever had. Former President Donald Trump, this is CBS. This is their version of the story. It's all over the place. Donald Trump on Monday charged that Jews who vote for Democrats hate Israel and their religion, igniting a firestorm of criticism from the White House and Jewish leaders. So he was in an interview, had been asked about Democrats' growing criticism of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu over his handling of the war in Gaza as the civilian death toll continues to mount. He says, "I actually think they hate Israel." He was being interviewed by Sebastian Gorka. "I think they hate Israel and the Democrat Party hates Israel," he says. And so you listen to the Democrats, they'll say that the MAGA group are a bunch of Nazis. They'll say that a lot of those Nazis, I hear a lot of anti-Semitic talk on all sides, honestly, these days. And yet, strangely, it looks like Donald Trump might actually be the candidate who would be most supportive of Israel, while the people who are coming out supporting him are actually not very supportive of Israel at all. They're more on the Palestinian side. It's a very strange political landscape. I think sometimes people aren't even listening to what they're saying or understanding what they're supporting. It's hard to make sense of it. And yet, in a twisted kind of way, in this new upside-down world that we live in, it all sort of seems to make sense in a bizarre fashion. It's hard to understand it, But it makes so much sense, doesn't it? It is, I don't know, these are unprecedented times. Unprecedented. Where did I want to take this after this? Well, I guess we should probably go to the White House, where Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor, brings us up to date now on the most current conversations between Biden and Netanyahu. And again, a lot of politics being played here. But I kind of wonder how much sincerity we are actually getting. Here we go.
I've got a few opening comments and then I'd be happy to take your questions. Earlier today, President Biden spoke with Prime Minister Netanyahu, as you all have heard. The two leaders discussed the latest developments in Israel and Gaza, and they spoke about the state of Israel's military operations. The president emphasized his bone-deep commitment to ensuring the long-term security of Israel, and he affirmed, as he did in the State of the Union, that Israel has a right to go after Hamas, the perpetrators of the worst massacre of the Jewish people since the Holocaust. Israel has made significant progress against Hamas. They've broken a significant number of Hamas battalions, killed thousands of Hamas fighters, including senior commanders. Hamas's number 3, Marwan Issa, was killed in an Israeli operation last week. The rest of the top leaders are in hiding, likely deep in the Hamas tunnel network. And justice will come for them too, and we are helping to ensure that. At the same time, more innocent civilians have died in this conflict, in this military operation, than in all of the wars in Gaza combined, including thousands of children. A humanitarian crisis has descended across Gaza, and anarchy reigns in areas that Israel's military has cleared but not stabilized. When the president visited Israel on October 18th, the first U.S. president to make a wartime visit to Israel, I might add, he said both privately and publicly that the United States has learned a vital lesson over the course of several wars. A military plan cannot succeed without an integrated humanitarian plan and political plan. And the president has repeatedly made the point that continuing military operations need to be connected to a clear strategic endgame. The president told the prime minister again today that we share the goal of defeating Hamas, but we just believe you need a coherent and sustainable strategy to make that happen. Now, instead of pause to reevaluate where things stand in the campaign and what adjustments are needed to achieve long-term success, instead of a focus on stabilizing the areas of Gaza that Israel has cleared so that Hamas does not regenerate and retake territory that Israel has already cleared, the Israeli government is now talking about launching a major military operation in Rafah. The president and the prime minister spoke at length about Rafah today. The president explained why he is so deeply concerned about the prospect of Israel conducting major military operations in Rafah of the kind it conducted in Gaza City and Khan Yunis. First, more than 1 million people have taken refuge in Rafah. They went from Gaza City to Khan Yunis and then to Rafah. And they have nowhere else to go. Gaza's other major cities have largely been destroyed. And Israel has not presented us or the world with a plan for how or where they would safely move those civilians, let alone feed and house them and ensure access to basic things like sanitation. Second, Rafah is a primary entry point for humanitarian assistance into Gaza from Egypt and from Israel. An invasion would shut that down, or at least put it at grave risk, right at the moment when it is most sorely needed. Third, Rafah is on the border with Egypt, which has voiced its deep alarm over a major military operation there, and has even raised questions about its future relationship with Israel as a result of any impending military operation. Now, the president has rejected, and did again today, the straw man that raising questions about Rafah is the same as raising questions about defeating Hamas. That's just nonsense. Our position is that Hamas should not be allowed a safe haven in Rafah or anywhere else. But a major ground operation there would be a mistake. It would lead to more innocent civilian deaths, worsen the already dire humanitarian crisis, deepen the anarchy in Gaza, and further isolate Israel internationally. More importantly, the key goals Israel wants to achieve in Rafah can be done by other means. On the call today, President Biden asked the Prime Minister to send a senior interagency team composed of military, intelligence, and humanitarian officials to Washington in the coming days to hear U.S. concerns about Israel's current Rafah planning and to lay out an alternative approach that would target key Hamas elements in Rafah and secure the Egypt-Gaza border without a major ground invasion. The Prime Minister agreed that he would send a team. Obviously, he has his own point of view on a Rafah operation, but he agreed that he would send a team to Washington to have this discussion and have this engagement. And we look forward to those discussions. The President and the Prime Minister also discussed the ongoing negotiations for an immediate ceasefire for several weeks in return for releasing hostages currently being held by Hamas and other militants in Gaza. We would look to build on that ceasefire into something more enduring and use the space created by a cessation of hostilities to surge humanitarian assistance at a vital moment. So far, this deal has been more elusive than we would have hoped, but we will keep pressing because we regard this as an urgent priority. As I've said before, Hamas could, of course, end this crisis tomorrow if it chose to do so. And as I've said before, far too little of the energy and the pressure to end this conflict has been applied to Hamas. We will keep pointing that out. The President and the Prime Minister agreed to stay in close touch in the days and weeks ahead on all of these issues, and of course, their teams are in daily contact on every element of this crisis, as well as the other threats that Israel faces from around the region and the shared threats that the United States, Israel, and others of our allies and partners face from Iran and its proxy forces across the Middle East. And with that, I'd be happy to take your questions. Yeah.
Jake, you mentioned that the ceasefire deal had been elusive. Understand that Hamas put a proposal forward. Is that still what you guys are working with, and is that still a live option at this point?
Hamas has put a proposal on the table. This is after Israel, working with Qatar, Egypt, and the United States, had indicated a willingness to move forward on a 6-week ceasefire in return for the release of a number of hostages, leading to further phases from there, and Hamas having given us nothing for quite some time. And the last time I stood at this podium, I pointed out something I believe today. If Hamas just handed over the elderly, the women, and the wounded tomorrow, there would be a 6-week ceasefire. They've put a proposal on the table where they've added a series of other conditions as well. Now, the Israeli government has responded by saying they can't just accept that. They regard some of those conditions as going too far, but that's what a negotiation is about. So as we speak today, in Qatar, you have teams from Israel, Qatar, and Egypt sitting down and banging through those details to try to arrive at an outcome over the next few days where there is actually a deal. And we believe that those discussions are very live, that a deal is possible, that we should be able to achieve it, and that it is the best way both to get hostages home and to alleviate the suffering of the civilians in Gaza. And from our perspective, we, the United States, are going to keep pushing on that, and the President had the opportunity to discuss that with the Prime Minister today.
And Jake, why did the President feel that this was an appropriate time for this delegation to come from Israel, and why did he feel that these conversations would succeed in ways that your outreach to the Israeli government have not previously?
Look, this is the natural evolution of a discussion between partners. We've had many discussions at many different levels between our military, our intelligence, our diplomats, our humanitarian experts, but we have not yet had the opportunity to have an all-encompassing, comprehensive, integrated, strategic discussion about how to achieve two things. One, the ultimate defeat of Hamas, and two, the protection of civilians and the stabilization of Gaza in a way that will lead to the long-term security of Israel, as well as the protection of innocent human life that is in Gaza. So from the President's perspective, we've arrived at a point where each side has been making clear to the other its perspective, its view, and now we really need to get down to brass tacks and have the chance for a delegation from each side on an integrated basis, everyone sitting around the same table, talking through the way forward. And from the U.S. perspective, this is not a question of defeating Hamas. And anytime I hear an argument that says, if you don't smash into Rafah, you can't defeat Hamas, I say that is a straw man. Our view is that there are ways for Israel to prevail in this conflict, to secure its long-term future, to end the terror threat from Gaza, and not smash into Rafah. That's what we're going to present in this integrated way when this team comes. We'll have it back and forth, and we'll let you know how that unfolds as we go forward. Yeah.
Can you describe the tone of the call?
Just
there have been
one more
reports
moment.
that they can be very tense, that they have ended abruptly. Can you sort of characterize what the tone was? And then also, did the president say that an invasion of Rafah is his red line? And what does that mean?
I went over the red line issue, which I know is the obsession of this group last week. I've got nothing more to say on that front, as you know, particularly for me. I think that's something that is posed in your questions. It's not stated as a declaration of our policy, and we've made that clear. With respect to the call, I'm probably not the best person to, give a kind of assessment of body language and tone. I can confirm it did not end abruptly. It ended in a totally normal way when they had each gotten through all of their points. And I would say it was very businesslike. Each of them recognize that we are at a critical moment in this conflict. They share a common objective, that is for Israel to prevail over Hamas. And they have a different perspective on this operation in Rafah, and they went into some detail on that and had the opportunity really to elaborate each of their respective views in a full-throated way, in the way they always do when President Biden and Prime Minister Netanyahu talk. So in that sense, I would say this call was much like previous calls that the two of them have had. They each agreed to have the teams get together, and then they agreed that the two of them would stay in touch as we go forward. Yeah.
Jake, the deadline for Israel to comply with the National Security Memorandum 20 is coming up on Sunday. Has Israel responded in writing?
So first, when you say to comply, what they have to do by Sunday is just provide credible and reliable assurances that they will abide by their international obligations, not obligations we've imposed upon them, but obligations they have freely accepted with respect to international humanitarian law, which of course includes not arbitrarily impeding the flow of humanitarian assistance where they can control that. So I cannot tell you today or confirm today that they have provided that. Obviously, as you said, they have several more days before they have to do so, and we anticipate that they will.
And then on a related note, Jake, on March 1st, President Biden said that he was going to insist that Israel facilitate more trucks and more routes to get more people the help they need. On today's call, did he make that clear?
Well, even before today, the results of the president making clear that this was a priority for him and his team working that at a detailed level operationally on the ground in Israel has resulted in certain steps, including the opening of a new gate that we have seen since the president gave the State of the Union, and work to flow more convoys to the north along the beach road as well, in addition to other steps like the landing of the first ship through a maritime corridor on the beaches of Gaza, and active work going forward to get that pier that the president announced set up off the coast of Gaza as well. So we have taken steps. The president reaffirmed today the need for Israel to do everything in its power, and even more than it has already done, to address the humanitarian crisis. And obviously we saw a UN report today, which Director Power of USAID spoke to quite eloquently. It's an alarming report about a possible impending famine if everyone doesn't do their responsibility to ensure we address that. That starts first and foremost with Israel, who has an obligation to step up and ensure that more is done to deliver food to starving people in northern Gaza. But it's also incumbent on us, the United States, and the rest of the international community to step up as well. We're proud to be the largest contributor of humanitarian assistance to Gaza, but there's more we can do, and there's more others can do as well. This has to be an all-hands-on-deck effort. Yeah.
Thank you, Jay. Given that alarming report that famine right now is imminent and the humanitarian catastrophe there, are words enough when it comes to discussions with Israel? Does there need to be some conditions put on military aid?
Well, first, obviously words aren't enough. It's action that matters, and the action that matters is flowing trucks and ships worth of humanitarian assistance, particularly food, water, and medicine to people who are gravely in need of it, as elaborated in that report. As I said, in the last few days, we've seen some steps forward. We need to see those sustained. We need to see them built on. But ultimately, our judgment comes down not to pledges or promises or words. It comes down to action, and we're going to continue to press on Israel to see the kind of action we want to see, and then we're going to take responsibility to do our part. And that's, for example, what the temporary pier is all about.
Reports that more than 20 people have been killed in that hospital attack. How confident is the U.S. that Israel is doing everything in its power to protect civilians?
I'd make 3 points about the reports of the attack at Al-Shifa Hospital overnight, last night and into today. First, Israel states that it was going after senior Hamas commanders and Hamas militants, and it is clear that Hamas fired back at Israel from that hospital. Second, we have seen Hamas, over the course of this conflict, use civilian facilities, including hospitals, to store weapons for command and control and to house fighters. And that places an added burden on Israel that very few militaries have to deal with, an entrenched insurgency, a terrorist group using the shield of civilian institutions to protect themselves during a fight, rather than meeting Israel on some open field of battle. And then third, it also tells us something else that of some concern that I spoke to in my opening comments. Israel cleared Shifa once. Hamas came back into Shifa, which raises questions about how to ensure a sustainable campaign against Hamas so that it cannot regenerate, cannot retake territory. And from our perspective, it is connecting Israel's objective to a sustainable strategy that is the vital thing we need to focus on right now, rather than have Israel go smash into Rafah. And that is what the president talked to the prime minister about today. Yeah.
During the call, did the president threaten at any point to withhold military aid to Israel if Israel moves into Rafah or a famine does ensue in Gaza?
The president didn't make threats. What the president said today was, I want you to understand, Mr. Prime Minister, exactly where I am on this. I am for the defeat of Hamas. I believe that they are an evil terrorist group with not just Israeli, but American blood on their hands. At the same time, I believe that to get to that, you need a strategy that works. And that strategy should not involve a major military operation that puts thousands and thousands of lives, civilian, innocent lives, at risk in Rafah. There is a better way. Send your team to Washington. Let's talk about it. We'll lay out for you what we believe is a better way, and I will leave it at that.
Did they talk about Senator Schumer's call for new elections, and what did the president say about that?
So the prime minister did raise his concerns about a variety of things that have come out in the American press. I'm not going to talk specifically about any one of them because I want to, let the prime minister speak for himself and also protect the discretion of the call. And I will just say that from President Biden's perspective, this is not a question of politics. It's not a question of public statements. It's a question of policy and strategy. That's what he's focused on. That's what he was focused on in the call. Yeah.
Can you give us any detail on the timing of this meeting here in Washington? Is that in the coming days and weeks? And is it your expectation, or did Israel commit to not proceeding with any Rafah invasion until that meeting takes place? Or is that unclear?
We have every expectation that they're not going to proceed with a major military operation in Rafah until we have that conversation. And they talked about as soon as the end of this week. It could be the beginning of next week. They have not fixed a particular date because each side needs to prepare effectively, but within that time frame, not a longer time frame.
Right, just to clarify, that's your expectation, or do they explicitly commit on the call to not proceeding with the Rafah operation?
I'm not going to put words in their mouth on this. I don't want to do that. You can ask them, but I think you will find that when asked, they will indicate to you that they're not going to go ahead with this before we've sat down and talked this all through. Yeah.
Vladimir Putin in a press conference spoke about a possible Navalny prisoner swap. He said he claimed they...
Okay, so enough that. And moving on to other subject matters, so we will refocus back on this. And of course, we do have this interview coming up with Kevin Meli from Crimea. He's going to talk to us about what's going on again in Crimea. He has some new information for us with the Ukraine-Russia conflict, but also he's been looking into reports for us about the movement of Russian troops or military personnel or police personnel, military police personnel, I guess, inside Syria, closer to the Syria-Israel border, and why that is happening. Of course, I already alluded to Russia's alignment with many of these Arab states that are in opposition to or adversaries of Israel. That relationship with countries like Iran, Syria, others. Problematic for some, and yet at the same time giving rise to hope for others who, through this conflict, have been looking to Russia to maybe use that relationship with those Arab nations to dial things back, to cool things off, to convince these adversaries of Israel, even use the relationship that Russia has with Hamas and Hezbollah to convince Hamas to release the hostages, for instance. So far, that has not happened. Instead, we continue to get escalation. Russia in a totally different position on this than the United States. An adversary of the United States at this point. Let's face it, we are at war. It is basically a NATO conflict in Ukraine, all of that overlapping and coming to bear on decisions being made in the Middle East. The conflict in Gaza, taking attention away from what's going on in Ukraine. And as a result, in part, I think that's why the money has not been flowing into Ukraine the way that it was. It's also not flowing because, honestly, on the domestic front, you have the Republicans, who are basically controlled by Trump, standing in opposition to it. And they've been effective in blocking additional money from going to Ukraine, at least to this point, at least delaying it and making, some strong scoring some strong political points on it. Trump in his rallies talking about the money flowing to Ukraine, and he's very much opposed to it. Again, two very different approaches to foreign policy between Biden and Trump. And Putin also, a major factor here. A major factor. And it's something that I think we here in the West overlook. His influence in the Middle East, Russia's relationship with these Arab nations. What does it mean? Does that mean that Russia is supportive of anti-Jewish sentiment? Are they supportive of the elimination of Israel as a nation state? Do they subscribe to, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free and Israel will be wiped off the face of the earth? I would hope not, but it's a difficult thing. And I'm not sure that everyone, I think people are molding the information to sort of fit the perspectives that they have on these issues, taking this fact and this piece of narration and that piece of narration to, I think, create a story that they're comfortable with because it's such a painful thing to talk about. But when we come back after this break, I hope that the perspective that Kevin Meli is able to give us will kind of cut through some of the propaganda that we're being fed from all sides, give us a clearer perspective on what's really going on in the Middle East, because we do have these reports coming out about Russian troop movements in Syria and how that is affecting things. And I have no doubt that, one, those troops are there for, well, not just military reasons, but also probably political reasons. And then the information that's flowing out to the public is being released for political reasons as well. Probably more political reasons than really military reasons at this point. That's my assessment. But when we come back, as I say, Kevin's going to join us, and I defer to him because he's over there and he's very knowledgeable, as you know, and has been digging into this, and he'll give us, I think, a pretty fair and unbiased perspective on it that will help provide clarity. Stay with us.
The information war is raging. Truth without integrity is worth nothing. Maverick News. Because those who have power and those who seek it must be held accountable.
The world is watching.
Join our family of truth seekers. Donate today and add your voice to the chorus of Maverick Knights. Donate at maverickdonations.com. Truth. Integrity. It's the Maverick way. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Israel and the situation in Ukraine and your trip that you just took, which gave you a new perspective on the defenses that have been implemented and placed along the Crimean Bridge. Let's start right there. Tell me about this trip and what you observed.
Yeah, we actually were heading to the mainland because I needed to deal with a bank. Banks work a little differently here. You have to go in person. So if you have a mainland bank, you have to drive there. So on our way over, we noticed quite a ways out from the entrance of the bridge that there were about 20 brand new missile launchers and radar systems lined up ready to be deployed. They hadn't actually been deployed yet. And they had a bunch of Terminator tanks as well lined up there. And that was in addition to the radar and missile launchers that we already know are there because we've seen them in the past. Now, it used to be that we'd drive across the bridge and we could see them on the side of the road. And now, other than a couple of the radar facilities, you don't see the missile launchers and stuff when you go across the bridge, which was kind of interesting to me. And, when you go through the entrance of the bridge to the inspection stations, they actually have these giant concrete blocks set in offsets like this. So you have to weave through them with your car very slowly. And you get to an inspection station. They've got a line for people without baggage, a line for people with baggage, and one for like buses going across. And if you bring luggage with you, if you're a tourist, they will go through every bag. They strip the car down, kind of like going across the border with Mexico. And it isn't, a random thing if they suspect you. They do it with everybody. Now we are smart enough for short trips not to bring luggage with us. So when we get in the line, we go through a little quicker, but they lift up like where the spare tire is and check to make sure there's nothing there. They're looking underneath the vehicles for explosives. They open up the hood, they open up the doors, they check all pockets, any bags, and the driver is responsible to stand there while they do that. Passengers go into an inspection station. They're x-rayed. Purses, telephones, anything like that go through an x-ray machine like in the airport. And then they give you a little card that says that you've gone through. Then the driver will come through and he will be inspected. He gets a different color card so they know who's the driver and how many passengers he had. And you get in the car, you go through another weave, and before they let you enter the bridge, they collect these cards and make sure that the number of people that were indicated are actually in the car and have been inspected. So we went across, no problems. Coming back, the bridge was actually closed by it's actually the highway patrol that runs these. All the police, the highway patrol, these inspection guys are all part of the Russian military. They report to the Ministry of Defense. But they stopped the bridge. There was a suspected drone or missile coming in, suspected. But what we saw is there were no air defenses on the mainland side of the bridge. Couldn't see anything. And all of a sudden, when they stopped the cars, these things just popped up out of the ground. And they're just there. They go up. They're working. They're ready to go. And it was just impressive. They just pop up all over. Now, what we were told is they actually move these around a lot so that they can't be targeted. So even if somebody ran their mouth and said, I saw this here, tomorrow it won't be there. So it's all mobile launchers, mobile radar, nothing fixed.
And the fog machines have been fortified?
Oh, yeah. They have, rather than relying on the fog truck, going across the bridge. And they have installed fog machines all along the bridge every couple of meters. A lot of people think that bridge is all over water. It's not. It's actually built on a sandbar. And the only water that it really goes over is where the shipping lane is. So they've got fog machines all along there. They turn them on. It generates that fog and covers a large area in an extremely short period of time. And, we also noticed that they've strengthened the defenses against sea drones. Now the only way for a sea drone to really get anywhere near the bridge is through the actual shipping channel. And that shipping channel will only allow one ship through at a time. It's very narrow. They've got so much of it blocked off. So there's a big backup of ships. While we were there, we were watching one ship go through, but they inspect those ships while they're out either in the Black Sea or up in the Kerch or the Azov Sea. And they go through those ships to make sure that they aren't carrying anything that could be dangerous to the bridge or bringing weapons to terrorist fighters, anything like that. They had some instances where there was a bulkhead in a container ship and a fake wall was put in, and then there were explosives and ammunition and guns in between the two walls. So they take a lot of time to go through those ships. It backs up the shipping a lot. There were, 30, 40 ships lined up out in the Black Sea when we went across. So they do not go through quickly.
Yeah, and the drone attacks have continued on the bridge.
They have. We didn't have one while we were waiting there, but last night they shot a aircraft-style drone down. There was pictures of it in the media today, and it was pretty spectacular. It was a heavily loaded drone, but it was shot down before it got to the bridge.
And can you again explain for our viewers the probable reasons why Ukraine continues to target the bridge?
I would say the biggest reason Ukraine targets that bridge is because it is the tie of Crimea to the Russian Federation. This was the big project where Putin said, Crimea belongs to us, and we're going to make it easy for people to go back and forth. So by striking this, number one, it kind of puts a dent in Putin's thought process and, a source of pride for him. But it also is a source of pride for Crimeans who use this bridge often. And by striking it and taking a section of the bridge down, it inconveniences Crimeans and supposedly is meant to, strike fear in people who live in Crimea. No, it doesn't. I find that Russians are pretty non-affected by things like this. My wife says it's their stoicism carried over from World War II, where whatever happens will happen and I'm not going to worry about it. But, some people get afraid and they won't come to the peninsula. Some people get afraid, they leave the peninsula, but a small amount. And we've got a land bridge now. And they're redoing the highway. There's a fairly good highway there, but they're making it 4 lanes in both, 2 lanes in each direction. And they're running a new train line down through there that's supposed to cut the trip from Moscow down from, 28 to 30 hours to 18 hours. So it'll be a high-speed train.
So Russia is taking steps to, they're thinking ahead and making sure they have, backup routes, other ways for people to get around and to move goods
Correct.
as well, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And it also ties Crimea to these new regions.
Yeah. And so there's obviously public relations strategy in play here for Ukraine for those reasons, because they're trying to disrupt or, I guess, disconnect the new ties the renewed ties between Crimea and Russia, while sending a message to the White House as well.
Yeah. So, they can say to the White House, see, we can strike this bridge. We can take Crimea. I think the likelihood of them ever taking Crimea back is extremely slim. This is something else we saw as we were going across the peninsula yesterday, is the anti-tank measures that are out in fields. And, so it's a well-protected peninsula. They're doing similar things up in the new regions. So it will be difficult unless they get, something big coming into Ukraine to help them.
And of course, we just went through this election, Vladimir Putin reelected, and the voters, the citizens, how should I phrase this? The vote didn't just take place within, Russia, as some people think of it, but also in these other areas that have been sort of reclaimed by Russia, including Crimea.
Yes. And of course, across Europe, Australia, the United States, Canada. So it's a worldwide thing for Russians. And, Putin won with 89% compared to the other guys who got, 3-4% each. And, a lot of what you're seeing in the West is that it was an unfair election. It wasn't legitimate. I can tell you that the way their election system is set up here, it was legitimate. People know that when they cast their vote, that it actually is counted and it goes to the candidate that they want to elect. 6 months before this election, Russians do not hide who they're going to vote for or who they did vote for. They will tell you, I voted for this guy. We've got people here I've talked to that have said, I voted for the opposition guy. They don't care because, people don't get hung up on things like that here. And people have been talking for 6 months about how they support Putin and what he does for this country. So I talked to a lot of people. I had a question from my co-host on my show of why even hold an election if you know what the outcome is going to be. And the answer came back with a resounding to show unity and to show that we support our government and what it does for people and that they're on the right path. And I got, I asked a bunch of people throughout the world that are Russian citizens this same question. And this is what they all said. They said, I voted today because I wanted to show my support for my government. People in Europe said that they wanted to show Europeans and Americans that all the Russian propaganda in the world is not going to turn them against their government, that they are united, and this is the way Russians are.
The phrase that has been used repeatedly over the past 2 days is stage managed. That's what I'm seeing in the headlines over here, a stage managed election. But you're seeing that they had international observers watching the voting process. We talked previously about the measures in place to make sure that any online voting was safe and secure. What is it that makes Vladimir Putin so popular that he's able to command 89% of the vote?
Is what makes him so popular is Russians remember what it was like at the fall of the Soviet Union. In the 90s, life was very difficult. My own wife talks about how they did not have food, they did not get paid, they would, sometimes they would be paid in bottles of vodka, and they would take these bottles of vodka and trade it to other people for, some eggs or a chicken, and they would have to grow some vegetables on their balconies. So people remember how bad it was when Putin first came to office and where he has brought this country to now, where he really focuses on his people. And I've heard, even before I moved here, I heard, oh, Putin is a corrupt president. He only gives government jobs to his oligarch friends, and then he gets money back from them on it. And I can't say whether that's true or not, but I can say that even if it is true, and I don't think it is, even in these projects, they're all for the benefit of his people, and they do benefit his people. So everything he does is about improving his people's lives.
So you and I had spoken previously about reconstruction following, destruction through war. Can you just bring our viewers up to speed on that? What has he done? You've told me that they're actually giving buildings and homes to the people in some of these affected areas as though it's some sort of disaster relief.
Yeah, like Mariupol, the city was destroyed. Now, whether you blame Ukraine for destroying it or Russia for destroying it really doesn't matter in this conversation. But people who lived there, Russia has hired construction crews, good construction crews, a lot of them Chechens, because they're known as the best construction workers around, the best craftsmen. And the government gives them the standards that they have to meet and the quality they have to meet. The regional governor is responsible to make sure that that is followed, or he will get fired and held criminally liable. And it's kind of the way Russia works, is whoever the director is or the head of the region, whatever, they're the one who is ultimately held responsible for what goes on underneath them and all the people that work under them, whether they're government officials or construction workers. So they've hired all these construction crews. They've gone in, they've built brand new multi-story apartment buildings, shopping centers, restored historical sites. And all a person has to do to claim their apartment is show up at the government office in that region and show them their internal Ukrainian passport or Russian one if they took Russian citizenship that says, I was registered at this address when the war started. And if they show that, then they're given the keys to an apartment. And many of them much nicer apartments than they had before that. So even people who have refused Russian citizenship and said, nope, I'm Ukrainian and I'm sticking with that, they will be given an apartment as well. So there is no coercion to become a Russian citizen to get your apartment there. But you have to prove you were registered there. And they do that with a lot of things here. Pregnant women, they pay them a lump sum of money when they have a child. They don't actually hand them the money, though. They put it into a savings account for them or a trust fund. And that woman can then bring receipts if she buys a bed for a child or, whatever it happens to be. She can bring the receipt. The government will verify it was spent on the child, and then they will reimburse her that money. So she has to pay for it, but then she gets reimbursed. Or she can save it. If she has 3 children, she's got 3 times the amount of money, and she can, say, buy an apartment or buy a house, and they will give her the money for that. And if she has a certain number of children, they will actually give them a small house to live in, and they can apply this money, if they saved it, towards that to get a little bigger house or a little bigger apartment. So these are the sorts of things that Putin does for his people. I had somebody a couple of days ago say, well, doesn't that mean that Russia has turned into a welfare state? No, you're expected to work here. If you don't work, you aren't paying into the system, you will be taken care of, but certainly not a welfare system.
that's now there's a question that just popped into my head. When Russia took back Crimea, what happened with the citizens? Because you said they can just show it like a Ukrainian passport,
Yep.
to avail themselves of government services, for instance, or compensation through this housing program. How does citizenship work there? If you lived there before, are they now automatically Russian citizens, or do they have to apply for citizenship, or do they how does all that work for the people?
Yeah, what they had initially was an extremely simplified version. For several months after Crimea rejoined Russia, people could go in and apply with their Ukrainian passport and say, I want to be a Russian citizen. And they were issued that citizenship very quickly, just based on saying, I want to change. Now, that only lasted for about 6 months, and then people, basically they missed their window of opportunity and they had to go through the whole application process. Now, for a Ukrainian citizen, they still have a simplified process. My wife used that herself. It still took her a year to get her permanent residency, and then probably another 6 months to get her citizenship. But that was through the simplified process. Me, on the other hand, it took me 3 years. So they have these simplified processes for now for citizens of the former Soviet republics.
So let's talk a little bit about the re-election of Vladimir Putin for 6 more years. He just delivered his acceptance speech over here in the West. The focus is on this question that was asked of him regarding the possibility of a third world war. Your comments on that, give us some perspective.
Yeah, the translations of the Russian that come out are typically skewed a bit. Even quite honestly, even when the English translators that work for the Kremlin do translations, not everything comes out correct. But when you take Western media and they throw them into the mix, things don't always come out as he said it. A major focus of his speech was that it was proof that the Russian people are united. They believe in what he is doing with his government, and they stand behind him and support him. And then he did mention that it's same warning he gave to the West that he gave during his Federal Assembly speech a few weeks ago. When he was asked this, he said, the West needs not to escalate in Ukraine. If they send troops in or heavy weapons for Ukraine to use against Russia as a country, this could spiral out of control quickly because we will respond to any aggression. So, this, I saw in some media outlets, this came out to, he made another threat to use nuclear weapons. It really wasn't that at all. It was just a reiteration of his point of do not send troops in. Do not make this a war between NATO and Russia. We do not want to fight NATO. But if you make it a war between NATO and Russia on the ground, we know that it already is, but if they make it on the ground with troops in Ukraine, then it could spiral out of control very quickly.
And it must be top of mind for him, these comments that we've seen from Macron in France, talking about the possibility of committing troops from his country and maybe other NATO troops as well. Those comments coming within the last, week or two? I guess even within the past week. So that must be, playing into things here.
Or even the Germans talking about giving them long-range weapons. So.
And other reports that we're seeing over here in the West are making reference to movements of Russian troops within Syria coming up closer to the Israeli border. Can you give us some helpful perspective on that as well.
Yeah, I can give you some perspective on that. These reports are coming out now, but the troops that are moving closer to the border have actually been there since November. There used to be, until sometime about a year and a half ago, 2 military police units. And Russia has withdrawn troops from Syria. They now only have 2 military bases there, a naval base and an airborne services base. And there was a military police unit stationed at both of them. And their job was to prevent attacks by Islamic terrorists on Syria and Iranian positions in Syria. So they were kind of the peacekeepers. It was, if you look at the news back 3-6 months ago, the West was actually talking about how this was a guarantee for Israel that they would not be attacked by these guys because Russia was keeping the peace. So officially, Russia says these are peacekeepers. They withdrew one of those units to the military base on the south edge of Russia, only a couple hundred kilometers away from Syria. And, in November, they redeployed this military police unit there. Now, we're talking a couple hundred guys. While I was researching this, I saw some analysts in the West saying there were 60,000 Russian troops in Syria. And, I know the Central Election Committee in Russia, people don't think about looking at things like this. In 2020, there were 6,422 Russians registered to the voting stations in Syria. And the voting stations tended to be around the military bases because that's where the military would vote. But these numbers would also include civilian support staff, the private military company guys, government officials over there, retired advisors. So the number of troops would actually be less than that. And, the Carnegie Politica group just recently did a study, and they estimate there's about 5,000 troops in Syria from Russia. A good number of them advisors and officers that are continuing to consult the Syrian government and the Syrian forces, much like the West has in Ukraine right now, advisors. And the number of actual troops is estimated to be about 2,000 total. So this isn't a big movement that's been pulled onto the border. And, it's a relatively small force in the whole country. Now, Russia says that it's still a peacekeeping force because there's been additional attacks by Islamic terrorists in the region. There have been. But I would also say that we have two other things going on here. At the time when this police unit was put back in Syria was right after Israel had struck Damascus. So I think that was a clear message to Israel that you need not be attacking Syria. We're here to help them and protect them. And God forbid you hit and kill Russian forces in the country, you will have declared war. So I think this was the warning then. This was in November of 2023. Now, the Western media, maybe at the behest of the government, has hung on to this information. And now all of a sudden, after Putin was elected and he gave this warning about, things could spiral out of control, all of a sudden we've got, Russia's a warmongering country and they're deploying massive amounts of troops in Syria against Israel. So there's a propaganda factor in that. It's the same timing as the conversation of the German officers talking about long-range missiles to strike the Crimean Bridge. Russia knew about this back middle of February when the conversations actually took place. They did not release it until after Putin's speech to the Federal Assembly, where he issued that same warning of be careful of escalation or it'll spiral out of control. And then Russia pulled that one out and said, see, the West is trying to, be aggressive. And I think this is the same thing. I think this is being pulled out of the West's pocket for exactly the same reason, to use it against Putin's statement about things spiraling into World War III.
Well, these things are...
This is 3-month-old news.
Yeah, these things are complicated because you get some truth, you get some exaggeration, you get sometimes through propaganda from any given side, fabrication, so it's a mix of information. It's important to have a proper perspective. I really appreciate you helping us make sense of all this, because it is very complicated. And these alliances, too, that we're seeing, they're complicated on both sides. You see different countries aligning, on one side and countries aligning on the other side. And in the Middle East, you have all these, you layer on top of that political ideology, religion, all of these other things, and it becomes a pretty murky place. And it's hard to make sense of all this. They're Nazis. No, they're the Nazis. Everybody likes to accuse everybody of being
a Nazi
Nazis.
if you listen to them. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, and when I look at what is happening with Russia, they're aligned with Iran more these days. Because with NATO pushing toward the Russian border through Ukraine, of course, that sort of pushed Russia into the arms of China and into the arms even of Iran and India. And now you have the BRICS nations. So some of these countries are Muslim. They're ideologically opposed to Israel. Russia's on that side of the equation. Now it starts to get really complicated, right? It's hard for people to make sense of this.
Yeah, and one of the things where, we were talking about Russia being kind of the peacekeepers in there is you do have Iran in there. And ideologically, they're against Israel. Russia has learned to integrate people of different religions and races hundreds of years ago. So they tend to play the peacemaker. And, right now you hear a lot about how even in Syria, Iran and Russia. Nobody talks about Iran, Russia, and Turkey. Turkey has the largest force of troops there to fight the Kurds that the United States is supporting in Syria. And Russia has been kind of keeping them at bay. There were some issues between the two countries on this for a while when Turkey wanted to go in and invade the Kurdish area. But because the West is pushing the way they are, they're growing closer and closer together, and they're cooperating on issues like this.
The danger, I think, and I'll get you to comment on this, is that as this conflict, especially in Gaza, continues to deteriorate, I guess, the lines of division become clearer and more entrenched and more polarizing, and that is what also leads to more and more danger. It diminishes either side's ability to be diplomatic. I think that's sort of the problem, either the United States or Russia, to find areas of compromise when people become when everything escalates and you get more countries involved, and this seems to have real danger of spilling over into a much broader conflict.
Yeah. And, many of the Arab nations are lining up with Russia and Iran. They do not like what Israel is doing. And, even the UN General Assembly back in November told Israel that they need to get out of the Golan Heights. And, they hold this because it's their supply of water. The big reservoir is there. So they need it, or they perceive that they need to control it. It prevents, it's kind of that same border zone that Putin talks about having in Ukraine. It's their border zone between Israel and, Lebanon. So, same sorts of things. It's a lot messier than people think it is.
Oh yes, yeah, absolutely. I don't think it's cut and dried either. I mean, we do see the United States for a lot of different reasons. Maybe not. Yeah, I don't. I'm a political realist. I think, really, and I think nation states tend to act in their own best interests, not always act out of what's morally correct. So you see,
Right.
Biden trying to put pressure on Netanyahu to scale things back in Gaza, but I'm not sure he's doing it because
Yeah.
for moral reasons. He's thinking about the election and the PR game, and and I'm sure that decisions on the Russian side are also made for pragmatic reasons.
Sure.
You know,
Well, it's like Chuck Schumer and his recent thing of, it's time for BB to go. And what did it really mean other than, the election again? We need to say something to get the Arab and Muslim population in the United States back on our side so they will vote for us, because right now they aren't going to. And, what does it really mean? Even if Netanyahu resigns, the next guy in line said that he will keep the same policies. So it means nothing. Biden saying that, he's told them to, draw back means nothing when they continue supplying arms to the country.
And
They
because
say
they
they don't have arms and supplies for Ukraine, but they have arms and supplies for Israel.
yes, it's a very strange political landscape right now, because if you look at a lot of the people that support Trump, for instance, I would say they are opposed to what Israel is doing, and that makes up a big portion of the Trump base. And yet Trump seems to be, well, just yesterday I think he was making pretty strong pro-Israel comments, supporting Israel very strongly, and yet it's his base that I think is, I don't know, it's just very strange to me. So, and yet the Democrats have, they'll pay lip service to Israel, but their actions seem to be pro-Palestine. It's just the strangest political reality. In reality, in the United States, you have Trump and Biden both supporting Israel, sort of.
Sort of, kind of,
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah.
They're supporting their money base.
Yeah, that's largely true too. And
Going
Biden,
back to the Golan Heights,
yeah,
who, it isn't recognized by anybody as belonging to Israel other than Israel, and Trump is the one who said, I recognize it as part of Israel. So I see these dividing lines. You get the Arabs in Russia will vote at the UN in one way, and it is consistently the guys who vote against them, much like this, Israel get out of Golan. It was the US, Australia, Canada, Israel, and the UK. And when they propose something, it's Russia, India, China, who say, nope, we don't agree with you. So it's like they've drawn these lines. My wife is always saying this, and I think it's true. Little boys.
Hmm. Yeah, and the more these emotions boil over in the Middle East, and they are boiling over, not in the surrounding countries as well, it becomes increasingly difficult for any kind of a diplomatic solution to this. That's what's making this so dangerous. And I do see how Russia has been, I think holding back escalation from anti-Israel factions, but it's becoming harder and harder for that to be maintained.
Yeah, it's a real quagmire. And it's a shame. Yeah, we need negotiations, but before we can have negotiations, we need diplomats.
Mm-hmm.
And, I don't see Trudeau as a diplomat. I don't see Biden or any of his administration as diplomats. Russia has some good diplomats, but nobody wants to talk to them. And, it's like Turkey saying they wanted to hold peace negotiations with Russia and Ukraine over Ukraine, and Ukraine saying, well, we'll have peace negotiations, but not include Russia. Now, what kind of diplomacy is that? Rick, you and I are arguing with each other over something, and we're going to come to terms, talk to each other, we're going to resolve it, but I'm going to do it by talking to somebody else, not you, Rick.
Yeah. The as much as they're different wars, they're absolutely connected. Ukraine and what's going on in Gaza, and with NATO doing what it's doing with Ukraine and Poland and Finland and Sweden, it just inflames things and makes it, again, more difficult for resolution in the Middle East as well. These things all come to bear in there.
Well, it's even going beyond that. You don't hear a lot about things like Armenia and Azerbaijan. I was talking to some people in Armenia just today, and I said, we're seeing all this stuff in the news about war between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And, it's the United States stirring things up. No, it's Russia's fault. And, they're supposed to be the peacekeepers. And the response I got was, it's the politicians. The danger of conflict is constant, unfortunately, but politics are politics, and it's the politicians. We're all people. We all want the same thing. If you strip all the other cradola out of it, you, me, an Israeli citizen, a Ukrainian citizen, a Russian citizen, they all want to live their lives, be left in peace, have something better for their families. And, we throw governments in there and we end up with hate. And, we need to look beyond that and look at the people.
Yeah.
On all sides.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's the ongoing quest for power and money.
Yep.
This is what's really at the root of all the evil, ultimately, I think. And as this drags on, all we can do is, I think, hope and pray that it doesn't escalate into something much, 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 much worse. And
yes,
that's the bottom line.
I hate to see the end of the world come.
Well, that's, I guess, a topic for another discussion.
Yeah.
And we'll have that opportunity, I think, because this is far from over. Kevin, is there anything else you'd like to add or think that we might have missed today?
Nope. I think we've covered quite a bit, and we'll do it again soon.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Unfortunately, yes.
All right.
Keeps us in business.
Kevin Meli, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Rick. My pleasure.
Maverick News. The world is watching. Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Gas prices. The carbon tax in Canada has not even hit yet. But gas prices are already on the rise. Out in Vancouver, British Columbia, gas prices reached over $2 a liter. You want proof? Here's your proof. Here's a shot of the sign at one of the gas stations. $2.09. As Pierre Poilievre, leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, would say, how do you like them apples? I don't like him at all. I don't think the public likes it either much. Now, tomorrow, the Conservatives are spearheading a vote in Parliament, calling on the NDP Liberal coalition to reverse their plan to hike the carbon tax April 1st. So the Conservatives see this as a crucial vote. They're saying that the Trudeau government introduced the carbon tax that punishes Canadians in the wallet. It makes everything more expensive in reality because the price of fuel adds to the input costs of virtually everything that we purchase in one way or another, because it increases the cost of producing and transporting virtually all goods, and even contributes to the cost of many services that consumers purchase. So this plan, this Liberal NDP coalition plan to hike the carbon tax by 23% April 1st, will raise the price then of not only gasoline, but groceries, home heating, all kinds of consumer goods. So this vote will take place tomorrow. You can be just about guaranteed, of course, that it will be defeated in Parliament, because the Liberal NDP government is still in place. The coalition remains, I guess, glued together. There was a small crack that seemed to appear recently, but they've sort of put that back together. Now here's Conservative Member of Parliament Michelle Ferrari speaking on this very issue. Today she even, I think, addresses this plan, or this vote that they have planned for tomorrow in the House of Commons. Let me bring this up, and here she is.
Hey everyone, Michelle Ferrari here, Member of Parliament for Peterborough Kawartha and outside of House of Commons West Block. So today I will be putting forward a motion in the status of women committee. We know that this cruel April Fool's joke by Justin Trudeau is coming April 1st, a scheduled 23% carbon tax hike. Now here's where it gets really shocking and disturbing. So according to Food Insecurity Among Canadian Families report, 48%, almost 50% of single mothers living below the poverty line struggle with food insecurity. And what will this increase on April 1st do? Make life even more unbearable. Does he care? Clearly not. Has he listened to 70% of premiers across this country? No. And you know what Chrystia Freeland said yesterday when Pierre Poilievre questioned her in question period about this? Because the average Ontario family is going to pay over $1,600, $1,676 in carbon tax, and is only going to get back just over $1,100. That is not net neutral. The emissions haven't gone down. Okay, people don't have an extra $1,700 in this cost of living crisis. But you know what she had the audacity to say? She said, we'll take no lessons from the Conservatives on protecting the least vulnerable. Those were her words. You can check it out. But we will stand up for the most vulnerable, including single mothers who are disproportionately impacted by this carbon tax. We will fight for this. We will call on the Liberals and NDP to support our motion, and we stand with you.
And the idea that the carbon tax actually pays people, that's what Justin Trudeau says, but we all know that when it comes to basic math, he falls a little bit short. Now, shifting gears just a little bit. Oh, I just also wanted to mention, you know, I should play this other clip. I've got this thing queued up. This is the Minister of Environment and Climate Change for Canada. He says that the government, now that this I dug up, okay, this is from some time ago. Not brand new, but well worth reviewing. If you haven't heard this, this is going to floor you if you have any common sense at all. Stephen Guilbeault says the government has basically no control over the price of gasoline. Here he is. And if you believe that, I've got swampland for
The reality is that we have no control over the price of the price of gasoline. The increase on the price of carbon pollution will be 3 cents a liter starting April 1st. In the last 2 years, well, between 2019 and 2021, refining margins in Canada went up by more than 20 cents. It's funny that the premiers never talk about that. They really want to talk about the 3 cents of relating to the carbon pricings, but we'll never talk about the fact that there's price gouging happening by refineries in Canada. That is worth 7 times the price on pollution. If they should be outraged about something, let them be outraged about that. Never hear them or Pierre Poilievre talk about that. I find that quite interesting.
Blah, blah, blah. Blah, 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 blah. Blah. Okay, so I looked it up, okay, and I've been aware of this, but I wanted to confirm some of these numbers, all right? So here's the truth. Marketing and retail margin on the price of a liter of fuel in Canada is 4 to 6 cents, or 4 to 6%. The refiner's margin is anywhere, depending on the region of the country, 10 to 25%. Then the rest is taxes. 25 to 35% is federal, provincial, and municipal taxes, and the GST or HST, depending on where you live, what they call that, the goods and services tax or the harmonized services tax or sales tax. 25 to 35%, and then 40 to 55% is crude oil costs, the raw material that they use to make gasoline and diesel fuel. So that's the breakdown. So we know then that as much as 35% of the price of fuel is taxes already. And now we're seeing that the carbon tax coming April 1st will add another, in total, 23%. It's going to increase 23% of what it is already. So whatever the tax is, it's going to increase 23%. Not that it's going to be another 23% of the cost. It doesn't work that way. It's 23% more than what you're being charged now. So Guy Beau says 3 cents. It'll be more. It'll fluctuate in terms of the actual price paid at the pump, but you're going to pay more. And we are seeing already now, because of inflation and because of higher taxes overall, under the Trudeau Liberals, the Trudeau NDP coalition government in Canada, we're now seeing prices reaching, honestly, record highs. Now, some are saying these are not record highs. It depends on where you live. In some jurisdictions, indeed, the price has reached record highs at the pump. Once the carbon tax hits, and we continue to see inflation within the next year, if it's not a record high now, I'm pretty sure it will be a record high very shortly, within months. At a time when Canadians can least afford it, especially those who are the most vulnerable. That's the truth. To downplay this the way Guy Beau does, it's just classic government misdirection. Talk about misinformation, disinformation, malinformation. That's just outright misdirection. That's using the oil companies as a scapegoat. Not that I have any real sympathy for the oil companies. They make money hand over fist. Don't get me wrong. But the truth of the matter is, as much as a third or more of the price of gasoline is taxes. For him to sit there and tell us that the government really has no control over the price of gasoline, that is a lie. Not only does the government control taxation, they control regulation, they control other taxes imposed on companies, including the oil companies. They also control subsidies that they hand out to these big oil companies as well. And they control the taxes that you pay, not just at the pump, but on the cost of energy to heat your home as well. And they control what kind of rebates you actually get on these taxes. And Trudeau playing a real big game there, isn't he? Trying to tell us all that the tax actually pays. When was the last time you actually saw a tax pay you? And if they're just going to tax it here and then give it back over there, why don't they just axe the tax and save all the money that they have to invest in the bureaucracy of administering the tax to begin with? You don't have to pay the bureaucrats to sit and push a pen or tap a keyboard to figure out how much to tax you at the pump, and then go through the process of scooping up all that money and then redistributing all the money. Why don't they just get off people's backs? I guess because they love to control things. Control freaks. The country sure has changed, hasn't it? I remember what it was like in the before times, especially if you go back to like the 80s. We had problems, but my goodness, nothing like what we have right now. And I'll tell you, the politics was a whole lot different back then too. Identity politics. We were getting into some political correctness as early as I remember, the late 70s. It was the first inkling, the first indication that I saw as a kid. I remember seeing references to something called political correctness. That was around 1976. I remember a magazine where I first read about it as a youngster. And from there, it's just been a progression of horrifying progressiveness to the point now where we see people with strong political ideology who truly seem to hate the country. That was very apparent, even before the pandemic hit. That was very apparent to me. Some people just really, really, really hate the country. I don't. I don't want to change. I want the country back. I don't hate the country. I think it's, again, misdirection for people to hate the country. I want to fix the country. I don't hate it. And it's not beyond hope. It is broken, and I don't recognize it. A lot of things Elon Musk posts I don't agree with, but I did take note of this. He reposted, retweeted, re-X'd, re-somethinged, depending on how you want to refer to Twitter, now known as X, or X, formerly known as Twitter. He posted this clip of this, I don't know, is it a journalist? Is he a journalist? Are either one of them journalists? Are they both ex-journalists? Is one a practicing journalist? Either way, it's an illustration of how people feel about the country and the state of free speech and free media.
You're over here appropriating a space for your own personality.
I'm a journalist.
You're not a journalist.
How do you decide who's a journalist?
I mean, considering I was fired as a journalist, you're no journalist.
Literally, would you rather be itchy or sick your whole life?
You're not doing this for what the actual conversation is, which is getting rid of this country.
Getting rid of this country?
Getting rid of America, getting rid of the West. This is what this is for.
You want to get rid of America?
Yes! Everyone here understands that at some level we need to get rid of America completely.
What should we do?
Decolonization, land back.
Where should we go, though?
In our communities. We need to go leave the capitals, leave the central capitals of commerce, of capital itself.
Okay, that guy is an idiot. He's sort of confused, and then you can see that he's sort of backing himself into a corner. And where should we go? Where should we go then? Into our communities, and where should we got to get out of our capitals. Now he's thinking of capitals in some, framing it in some way that it's like a reference to capitalism or something. That guy's a moron. Oh yeah. Just every day I wake up and I wonder what's going to surprise me, and that was the one. That got me. That one right there. Sorry. It's just, it is funny because he's just so uneducated. That's actually scary. Jeez. Okay, I have to take a break. I'll be right back.
Fighting the Great Reset. By leading the Great Resistance. Maverick News. The antivirus programs for your mind.
I'd like to interview Donald Trump. I'd love to interview Donald Trump, but Nigel Farage got to interview Donald Trump. And in the interview, he says he might deport Prince Harry. I did make brief reference to it the other night, but here's the clip, if you missed it. Just thought I'd share this. And, we're just getting into a little bit of the royals here tonight.
She, I would say, although she wouldn't show it because she was strong and smart, but I would imagine they broke her heart. The things that they were saying were so bad and so horrible. And She was in her 90s and hearing this stuff. I think they broke her heart.
No, it was horrible.
I think they really hurt her very
But
badly.
if he's lied on his visa form, doesn't the truth need to come out?
We'll have to.
Should he get special privileges that nobody else does?
No, and we'll have to see if they know something about the drugs, and if he lied, they'll have to take appropriate action.
Appropriate action.
Yeah.
Which might mean not staying
Oh,
in
I
America.
don't know. You'll have to tell me. You just have to tell me. You would have thought they would have known this a long time ago.
You would.
But I thought they were very disrespectful to the family, to the royal family. I'm a big fan of the concept of the royal family and the royal family. Now, I'm a little prejudiced because I thought the Queen was incredible. I mean, think of it. All those years, 75 years, she's almost never made a mistake.
Right. It's almost unbelievable.
So again, that's why the whole political scene right now is so upside down, weird, and hard to explain, hard to understand, because I know so many Trump supporters, and, especially here in Canada, it's less relevant in the United States, I guess, so maybe that's why it doesn't impact him down there. But here in Canada, most of the Trump supporters I know are anti-colonialists, therefore anti-monarchy. They want to separate Canada from the monarchy. They want to decouple. They don't like it. But a lot of them don't like the government, period. But anyway. But there he is saying he liked the Queen. He thinks the royals are okay. And the people that support him the strongest are probably the most, well, I don't know. See, that's the other weird thing. As much as they don't like the royals, it's actually the people on the other side of the political spectrum, I think, that are the hard line people calling for decolonialization. It doesn't seem to make any sense. The other thing that is perplexing to people is Kate Middleton. Talk about conspiracy theories. She's been missing in action for a while. Oh my, do I have the the video here queued up? And don't worry, we've got Godzilla coming up here too. Oh yes, we do. Godzilla. But that's something else. And we're not even into this is the actual news. This is not a segment from our news show, Truspiracies, where we show you the news that is so true, it's unbelievable. Where's the Kate Middleton stuff? Come on, Kate. There we are. Okay, so Kate Middleton has been, as I say, missing in action, but there's a new video out. So a shopping trip is where Kate Middleton, apparently healthy, seems to possibly have been spotted. There is a kind of a grainy video that has emerged. Everybody's been speculating about her. Some people even thinking maybe she's dead, or maybe just really sick. But maybe not. I don't know. And then people are looking at this video, which was published by the British tabloid The Sun. It shows a man in a baseball cap and a jacket. He's there with a woman who has brown hair, wearing a hooded sweater and sports leggings. And the newspaper says that this video was shot at a Windsor farm shop near the home of Kate and William, her husband, Prince William. And then on the front page of the paper, it says, "Great to see you again, Kate." And then we've seen even, some American media pick this up. TMZ had picked up the video, and they're saying it's legit. But online, there's a lot of people saying, "I don't think so." I'm going to show you what we have. You can make up your own mind, folks. Okay. Let's take a look here. Okay. So here's the video. Got the sun watermark all over it, okay? So is this William and Kate?
It's all very much up in the air.
Okay. Does that look like them? Does that look like her? I don't know. I don't know. There she is. There he is. But who is he and who is she? Let's take a closer look, shall we? There's a still. Let's take a closer look. Okay, there's a still shot, a freeze frame. Does that look like Kate? I don't know. I don't know. I don't think it looks much like her at all. I think maybe this video... Well, I'll let you decide. There it is. Great to see you again, Kate. There's the front page of the Sun. I don't know. The face looks slimmer to me. Maybe she has been ill. Maybe she just looks different. Maybe it's the lens of the camera doing something funky. And then they're trying to tell you that prior pictures of Kate indicate a height difference. So you see on the left, the Kate's eyes come up to the prince's collarbone, but in this picture, the eyes come up to his mouth. Now, the question would be, are they photographs taken both where the two of them are standing on ground that is level and of the same level for both of them in both instances? That's investigative journalism. Some speculation that Kate will likely make some sort of appearance, public appearance, in a more formal way, in a more public way, over the Easter holiday. Hard to say, don't know. But Americans are certainly fascinated with the royals, aren't they? I would say so. Now, what else do I have for you this evening? We did the gas price thing. We did, oh yes, now Godzilla. Who's a Godzilla fan? Who remembers Godzilla? Who wants a new Godzilla movie? Who would like to see Godzilla up close and personal? Well, in Tokyo, Godzilla not only made an appearance on the street, Godzilla was served as police chief of Tokyo for a day. Here's Godzilla. Here we go.
アカデミー賞で視覚効果賞を受賞して話題となったゴジラが警視庁池袋署の一日署長に就任しました。
This is some sort of a campaign for traffic safety in Tokyo. And so there's Godzilla. Oh, yes. What do you make of that? You know, Godzilla is actually, if you really dig into it, I don't know if anybody really pays much attention to the deeper meanings, if they've analyzed Godzilla, the storyline, but Godzilla is like a metaphor for the United States. Godzilla is, you know, the nuclear power. It's this giant dinosaur, lizard creature thingy that becomes huge because of exposure to atomic radiation. And that is what Godzilla is. It's like the Godzilla character is a metaphor for the United States. But it's fun. And he is a giant Godzilla. But I always remembered Godzilla being a little bigger than that. I don't know about you. He didn't look as big as a building, but still pretty fun. Anyway, that gets us to the end of tonight's broadcast. I really appreciate you guys hanging out with me here, as usual. Hope you found what we did tonight helpful, useful, and maybe even a little bit entertaining. And a big thank you to Kevin Meli for helping to provide some perspective on those troop movements or military movements inside Syria and giving us a greater understanding of what's going on over in Russia, Crimea, and even in the Middle East and in Ukraine, of course. So we will be back tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Please like, share, subscribe. Make sure you subscribe over on Rumble if you're over there. That would really help us out a lot. And hit the notification bell if you're over on YouTube and subscribing to one of the 3 YouTube channels that we are running on this evening. We will return tomorrow evening, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, here on the Maverick News Channel, where we have the antivirus programs for your mind. Catch you on the flip side.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.